Welcome to the 50 for 50 podcast for Sycamore View Church in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm your host, Anna Moser. In 2028, our church will turn 50. As we look forward to that celebration, we're taking a look back at the stories and people who have shaped our church. 50 stories over 50 months to celebrate 50 years. I encourage you to jump on our website, sycamoreview.org/50-4-50 to watch a short video telling this month's story. We'll be diving deeper into that story here with a special guest each month. So let's jump right in. It's the month of May, and this month we are talking about somebody who had a profound impact on our church and our mission and our vision and the way we see our neighbors, and that is Lee Brown. And so we're doing a little bit of a different format for the podcast this month. Instead of having a guest for me to interview, we've decided to ask people to share their favorite Lee Brown stories. And we could probably fill a lot of hours of Lee Brown stories in this podcast, but we just asked the people that were in the 50 for 50 video that I encourage you to go and watch. And these people shared what Lee Brown taught them for the video, and we wanted to hear some of the stories. So I'm sure there'll be some funny stories, there'll be some heartwarming, there'll be some sad stories, but I hope maybe just by hearing these stories we can all keep learning things from Lee Brown. So here we go.
My name is Anna Grace Hinkle, and this is a story that I would like to share about Lee Brown. I remember riding with Mr. Lee, as we called him, to church on a lot of Sundays and Wednesdays. I had to have been in later elementary or middle school because I couldn't drive yet, and it became a regular thing for my parents to pick him up for services. I could always tell when he'd been in the car because it had a certain scent, and Caleb was always on full blast. He filled so many car rides with beautiful singing. I remember him practicing for his praise team debut and singing Cry Out to Jesus, and I just got chills, and I think I've gotten chills every time I've heard that song since. He used his voice for beautiful singing, but he also used his voice for vulnerability. He never sugarcoated how things were. He was honest with my parents on their drives about his struggles with self-esteem, substance use, and depression. And I'm not sure he knew that I was listening during these car rides. But these drives were one of the first times in my life that I remember learning that there is so much power in vulnerability. He taught me that there's no need to sugarcoat things, and that there's power in just showing up, existing, and being who you are.
Hi, I'm Donna Davenport, and I'm one of the ministry assistants here at Sycamore View Church, and I had the privilege of knowing Lee Brown for over 10 years. We always called him Lee Dog, and that's how I will refer to him. And one of the stories I have is I remember on the 4th of July, back in 2016, Lee Dog came to our house to celebrate the holiday with our family. We all sat around the dining room table and ate, laughed, and shared all kinds of stories. I especially remember a moment when we decided to set up a card table and chairs in the breezeway so we could play board games. There were 4 of us that decided to play Scrabble. It was me, my almost 6-year-old grandson, my husband's business partner from Taiwan, and Lee Dog. I recall thinking, what an assortment of people is assembled around this table. And even later in life, I've thought about it in a sense of someday, this is what heaven will look like, a definite assortment of people from all those that God created. Anyhow, later we all went out to Northeast Bartlett where they were setting off the city fireworks. After the first few seconds of loud crackles and booms, Lee went diving back into Doug's vehicle with a serious look of fright on his face. That's when we discovered that Lee definitely did not like fireworks, firecrackers, anything that boomed or made a popping sound. Needless to say, we left and headed back to our house for a while, and later Doug took Lee back to his place loaded with leftovers. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as Lee got out of the car, he was met with a bottle rocket that exploded right at his feet. Once again, he dove headfirst back into Doug's vehicle while all the time hollering and screaming. I'm just saying, I'm not sure if my friend Lee got much sleep that night. I miss you, Lee Dog. But I'm so very, very thankful for all the wonderful memories and that God allowed our paths in life to cross.
My name is Kevin Rogers, and I want to share a story about Lee Dog. As I said in the video, one time when he fell off the wagon, he was having a particularly bad day and was really, really upset about what he perceived as letting me down. I never, ever let him feel like he let me down. I always wanted to be sure that he knew that, no matter what happened, I still supported him. Well, at this particular time, I had just gotten a new album by a group called 6 a.m. And it goes back to the musicians. It's him relating his story of his falling off the wagon. So I played this song called Accidents Will Happen. Accidents Can Happen. And it's talking about him, the singer, relating the story about how he had a relapse. And the lyrics are, accidents can happen, but it's okay. We all fall off the wagon sometime. It's only one day. You haven't thrown everything away. And when it got to that point, I didn't often see Lee totally lose his cool, but he was just a sobbing mess in the front seat of my car. And I made sure that he knew that the end of that song is letting him know that even though accidents happen, learn from what's happened and make yourself better.
This is Randy Lillard. Lee was a great friend of mine, and everywhere you went in Memphis, and I went in many places in Memphis with Lee over a few years, he seemed to know people. It seemed like everybody knew Lee. I posted pictures sometimes on Facebook with Lee and me at a restaurant or whatever, and I would get comments from friends of mine that said, "Oh, I know Lee." But he introduced me to a number of places in Memphis that I really was not aware of or had never been to, especially in the Midtown area. And one of those was the barbecue shop on Madison. We went there a number of times. He knew the owner. We always got great service there, and he knew the servers, and it was just fun to go there. Oftentimes we went to restaurants. He had a habit of telling waitresses, "Did you know that you're the most awesomely beautiful person I've ever seen?" And of course they would kind of be embarrassed a bit, but I'm sure it made their day. After Tricia passed away, there was many nights, evenings where I didn't really have much to do or anybody to hang out with, and Lee was someone that I could call and we could go do something. And one of those times was New Year's Eve, either 2016 or 2017. I can't remember for sure. But I didn't have any plans for that evening. And so I called Lee and I said, you want to go eat something and go out, for the evening or whatever. And so he said, sure, because he didn't have any plans either, of course. And so I picked him up and we sort of drove around and talking about where we wanted to go. And he suggested we go to this place called Neil's Bar and Grill over on Quince. And so we went over there and it was packed with people, New Year's Eve partiers, thing. And so we walked in and immediately the guy behind the bar knew Lee. And so he got us both, a drink, a Coke or whatever it was we wanted, and on the house. And so we sat down there kind of right near the entrance. And there was a big area where lots of people were, and there was a stage in there and so forth. And so we're sitting there, and Lee says at some point, he says, "I'm going to go up here and talk to this guy I know." And I said, okay. And so he kind of weaves his way through the crowd and disappears. And I'm thinking, well, he's going to be back in a few minutes. Well, the next thing I know, they're introducing Lee on stage, and he's singing the Lee Greenwood song, "God Bless the USA." So the crowd went crazy and loved it, and of course he loved it, and it was definitely a most unique and memorable New Year's Eve.
My name is Barbara Bird, and I have many stories to share about Lee Brown, but here are just a few. I definitely remember Lee coming home with us on Sunday afternoons, and we had a ritual. Lee would come home with us. Our grandchildren, our daughters at the time, were like, 4 through, 6, something like that. They were young. And we would always stop at Kentucky Fried Chicken, get the chicken, bring it home, and then Lee would fall asleep. And he would sleep until it was time to go back to church again. And we would, take him, then we would take him home in the evening and take him back to his apartment. And that was kind of a ritual for quite a while, and he was, the girls remember him as being kind to them and participating in their imaginary play and that sort of thing. So one afternoon, I was taking the girls to Mud Island. We like to go down there and walk through the water. We had done that. And Lee had come along with us. And the girls wanted to get into the pedal boats. So we got into the pedal boats. And getting Lee in there was quite an effort. And he was, even getting in, he was like, Miss Barbara, I don't know. He got in there. We got him in there, and we're pedaling out there, and we get him back. And at the back, he's just yelling. He's like, Miss Barbara, I can't get out of here. But once we got him out, he was laughing, I was laughing, the girls were all laughing, and it was a very good memory for those girls.
I'm Gary Bird, and I'm not sure if they're stories or they're just part of the way it was with Lee. I can remember the first time I ever met him. John Kennedy introduced me to him. And John said he's different before I ever saw him. And the book, same kind of different as me, was out at that time. And I had not read it, still haven't read it. And I just remember that Lee, people were talking about Lee kind of in the context of the book. And I just started getting to know him, and I found out that there was a lot more there. I mean, at first he scared the daylights out of me. He really did. You have this massive person standing in front of you. You ask him what he does, he says, I'm a bouncer when I work. And I knew by then that he had been homeless for a number of years. And one of the very first times that I ever really had a conversation with him about where he was in life and what he did. And he was telling me about the fact that he had I think he called it a payee guarantor. And it was somebody who he would receive a check from the state, and he would take the check, and that check had to go in someone else's name to take care of some of his needs. And so he's talking to somebody on the phone, and we're on the front porch of our house, and he hands me the phone and says, somebody wants to talk to you. And I took the phone from him. I have no idea what's going on. And on the other end of the phone, I hear, hi, this is Joe Birch, Action News 5. And so that's when I found out that Joe Birch was his guarantor. And but I always thought that was hilarious that he introduced himself that way. But then Lee that was just the first person he knew. I don't think there were many times we didn't go to a restaurant somewhere that people would come up to him and say, hi, Lee. There was a restaurant over on Madison that we would go to quite often. And it burned down. And Lee just had no idea what he was going to do because that was his favorite restaurant. And so when the guy announced that he's going to probably be rebuilding in Germantown, I think, Lee was trying to figure out how he was going to get out there to go to his restaurant. But it was really funny, too. Every morning between 9 and 9:30. I'd kind of watch my phone, because if I got a phone call between 9:15 and 9:30, Lee was calling to see where we were going to go for lunch. And I mentioned that to John Kennedy, and John said, "Oh, don't you know? He goes through the contact list in his phone every day to figure out who he wants to have lunch with." And so you're just at the top of the list. That's why he doesn't get up until like sometime around 9. So you just happen to be near the top of the list. So he's keeping going. So that was always something that I kind of found fun. But no, there were a few serious health scares with him. It was amazing the number of people who were always there to take care of him and help him. John was, without a doubt, the person who took more time and more care for Lee. And I think John was the reason I honestly believe that Lee ended up at Sycamore View. And then that was the reason that so many people will have Lee Brown stories.
This is Anna again, and I just want to say thank you to all of our guests who shared their Lee Brown stories. And I actually got to be around for a few years with Lee Brown when I first got here in 2016. And sometimes when I got here in the morning, he'd be one of the first people I saw. And he would always tell me, if somebody didn't tell you today, you're beautiful. And that just maybe could feel a little creepy at first, but it really meant a lot to me because I hadn't heard that day or maybe in a while, and he always just made me feel seen and feel loved, and I'm really thankful for the impact that he's had on our church and continues to have through his legacy. So I thank all the people that were on the podcast today sharing those stories, and we will be back next month in June. We'll be talking about Family Factory, so we'll see you then.